June 4th, 1944. Thousands of ships are already at sea. Thousands of men are already loaded onto landing craft, seasick, terrified, waiting for the order to invade Nazi-occupied France. Then Eisenhower gets a report that makes his blood run cold. Cancel it. Right now. The man who said those words wasn't a general. He'd never commanded a single soldier. He was a mathematician from Scotland who, a few years earlier, had been counting penguins on a polar expedition. His name was James Stagg, and in November 1943, the Allies handed him a job that could decide the outcome of World War II. Predict, with zero margin for error, the exact weather over the English Channel weeks in advance. No satellites, no radar, no computers. He was given command over teams of military meteorologists, despite having no formal military training at all. Here's the problem nobody talks about. The officers under him didn't respect him. And that's about to blow up in everyone's face. Stagg wasn't just fighting the weather. He was fighting his own people. He had to coordinate 3 separate teams of meteorologists: the Royal Navy, the RAF, and the U.S. Army Air Forces, each one running on different data, different methods, and each one convinced the others were wrong. Imagine 3 doctors arguing over your diagnosis while you're on the operating table, and you have to pick which one to trust, except the patient is 150,000 soldiers. And it gets worse. There were no satellites, no radar. Forecasters were relying on scattered surface observations from a handful of ships and land stations, and reliably predicting weather more than a day or 2 out was basically impossible. So how do you plan the largest invasion in human history around weather you can't actually predict? You don't. You gamble. And by June 3rd, the gamble was already going wrong. June 3rd, 1944. 2 days before the planned invasion. The American team predicted good weather for June 5th. The British teams disagreed completely. They were certain a storm was coming. Neither side would back down. Picture the room. Grown men, career officers, screaming over charts. And in the middle of it, one man, with no military rank that commanded real respect, has to make the final call that goes to Eisenhower himself. This is the exact moment where D-Day almost got canceled before it even had a date. By the first days of June, the news was catastrophic. High winds, rough seas, low cloud cover. Exactly the conditions that would turn an amphibious invasion into a massacre. Eisenhower had originally wanted to launch on June 5th. Ships were already loaded. Some were already at sea. Every hour of delay increased the risk the Germans would spot the fleet, and the entire element of surprise would be gone. This is the moment from the cold open. This is when the order almost came down to scrub the whole operation. Buried inside 2 storm systems, Stagg spotted something almost nobody believed was there. A gap. A narrow window of survivable weather, maybe 24 hours wide, squeezed between 2 fronts of bad weather. He predicted a storm on June 5th, but a break in the weather the very next day. If he was right, this was the only shot the Allies had before tides and moon phases turned against them for weeks. If he was wrong, tens of thousands of men would drown before they ever reached the beach. President Truman later said this was probably the only day in the entire month of June the operation could have actually launched. One man,
One forecast, millions of lives on the line. Eisenhower made the call, delay the invasion by 24 hours to June 6th.
Here's the part almost nobody knows. The Germans looked at the exact same storm and came to the exact opposite conclusion. Without access to the same Atlantic weather data the Allies had, German meteorologists decided the weather made an invasion that week essentially impossible. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, in charge of the entire Atlantic Wall defense, trusted that assessment so completely that he left his post in Normandy to visit his family back in Germany during the exact window Stagg had identified. The same storm that nearly forced the Allies to cancel the operation ended up being the thing that made the Germans let their guard down completely. Two sides, same sky, two completely opposite bets. Only one side was right. At dawn on June 6th, 1944, exactly as Stagg had calculated, the wind dropped. The clouds broke just enough. The sea, still rough, became crossable. Over 156,000 Allied soldiers hit 5 beaches in Normandy. Air support could fly. Naval guns had the visibility to actually hit their targets. And the German defenders, many of them still convinced no invasion was possible in this weather, were caught completely off guard. After giving the final go-ahead, Eisenhower turned to Stagg and, half joking, said, "For heaven's sake, hold the weather to what you have forecast for us. Don't you bring any more bad news." It's a joke, but it's also the exact weight of what had just happened, compressed into one sentence. James Stagg never fired a weapon that day, never set foot on a single beach. But his forecast, built on incomplete data, teams that couldn't agree, and pressure almost no one could survive, was just as decisive to the success of the invasion as any general on the ground. He was later knighted. He kept working at the UK's Met Office until 1960 and quietly lived the rest of his life as arguably the most important meteorologist in military history, a name most people have never heard of.